video. Like I said, gotta keep this shit rolling, so let's get into it. Continuing back on with my ranking videos, so today we're gonna be doing wide receivers, gonna be doing my top 10 today. Yo, no lie, these wide receivers looking nice. Before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about what I actually look for in these wide receivers like I did with my running backs. So pretty obviously, number one is gonna be being an alpha wide receiver soaking up majority of the volume. The next thing I really look at is quarterback and overall offense. After those two things, it's really up to the talent and the possibility of opportunity increasing over the year and how likely I really think that is to happen. In previous years, I've definitely made the mistake of not focusing on the quarterback enough, and that's really hurt me. So this year, I've tried to change that and make sure one of the key things I'm considering is the quarterback and the offense. All right, no more wasting time though. Let's get into it. All right, pretty obvious. Number one wide receiver, we got Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams. He had 145 receptions, over 1,900 yards, and 16 touchdowns. Pretty fucking absurd stats, honestly. He led the league in receptions, targets, yards, touchdowns, yards after the catch, and other stats. In a full PPR league, he scored more points than any other fantasy player last year. That's including all the quarterbacks. And this really wasn't a one-year fluke. Over the past 3 seasons, he has the most receiving yards out of anybody. Not much has really changed in their offense. They're coming off a Super Bowl. They are probably losing Odell Beckham Jr. and they lost Robert Woods. They added Allen Robinson, so it makes me think his role is going to be the exact same in that offense with just another year of chemistry, which they had the 5th most passing yards last year and the 2nd most passing touchdowns. So pretty clear-cut 101 right here for the wide receiver. Next up, we got one of my favorite players in the NFL, Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. Had 108 receptions, 1,600 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. He was 4th last year in total fantasy points and also 4th in fantasy points per game last year. Over the past 2 years, he has the most receiving yards in the NFL. It's another year of him developing since he's so young, and Adam Thielen also getting older. Kirk Cousins also isn't somebody I really would consider an elite quarterback, but he's definitely a good quarterback, and he's produced all of this for Justin so far, so no reason to really think that he wouldn't now. They've also had some coaching changes, and there's been a lot of rumblings of them being a more pass-heavy offense, which is another reason to like him even more. And even if that wasn't the case, I'd still have him ranked here. Like, that's just another added bonus to solidify him here, in my opinion. I think the top 3 wide receivers are kind of obvious, and I have JJ at number 2 over Jamar Chase, who I have at number 3, just because I kind of like his play style more. Jamar Chase had 81 receptions, about 1,400 receiving yards, and 13 touchdowns, so lower reception total, but higher touchdown, the big play guy. Kind of just preference of what kind of style of wide receiver you like. I like the more consistent separator that gets wide open rather than the big play with week over week inconsistency. But Jamar could easily finish as a wide receiver 1. I mean, he's obviously special. Last year was his rookie year, and he finished 5th in total fantasy points and fantasy points per game. One of the best overall talents of the wide receiver we've seen in a while. He's in the exact same offense that he was last year with Joe Burrow, and they have their college chemistry, so it's just going to be another year of developing and another year of chemistry building with them. And their offensive line is significantly improved from last year. It's one of the biggest improvements of anything over the offseason for really any team, and it just, I think, put Jamar in that elite top end wide receiver tier for this year. So I think those 3 are the top 3. They're in their own tier. Moving on to the next tier, and the next wide receiver at 4, I got Stephon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills. Last year was weird. Everyone kind of seemed pretty disappointed in him, and I know a lot of my friends were kind of pissed that they drafted him. He still had over 100 receptions, over 1,200 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. And he finishes a 7th wide receiver in fantasy. So if that's going to be your disappointing year, then I will take that every single year. He's been an elite wide receiver for years now. He's getting paid a ton of money. He's been nothing but elite since he's gotten to the Bills, and the Bills scored the 3rd most points of anyone in the NFL last year. They have Josh Allen, who's arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, and he's tied to him. So I think his combination of a high floor with high upside just solidifies him here. Really doesn't have a ton of question marks. The only really thing holding him back is that Josh Allen takes a lot of touchdowns away because he rushes them in. Besides that, there's really nothing you can say about him, and probably the only reason why he's not in the higher tier. Moving on from there, we got Devontae Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. That sounds super weird to say. While it's not super significant since he's moving on from Aaron Rodgers, last year he had over 120 receptions, over 1,500 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns. He also finished as the wide receiver 3 in total fantasy points and fantasy points per game. One of the best wide receivers I've personally watched in my lifetime so far. Just unbelievable at every single level. But he's moving on from one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr, who I think probably gets unnecessary amount of hate. He's a good quarterback. He's just not Aaron Rodgers, no matter what Devontae Adams says. But the Raiders still had the 6th most passing yards last year in the NFL. Like, it's not like he's going to a bad team. He's just in one of the toughest divisions that we've ever seen in the NFL with a really good quarterback, but not an elite quarterback, I would say. Plus, there's a lot of competition in Vegas. Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake. Probably safe to assume he's not going to average the like 27-28% target share that he has over the past 4 years, but still going to be absolutely elite. He's way too good not to be. He's going to be wide open all the time, and him and Derek Carr have that college connection, so they're going to be looking for each other. There's just a couple more question marks, so I don't think I can put him on the same tier or same level. Actually, I have him in the same tier as Stephon Diggs, but I can't put him on the same level as the other guys ahead of him, but I still think he's going to be super good. This is where I would take him right now. Next up, we got CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, who had 80 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. CeeDee is somebody who I loved last year, and he was a little bit disappointing. He finished at like the wide receiver 18. And the biggest reason for this jump, I mean, first off, he's an unbelievable talent. He's one of my favorite players to watch. I love him. But also Amari Cooper left, who had over 100 targets last year, and really debatable who's been the wide receiver 1 for them. On top of that, the Cowboys scored the most points of any offense last year, so he's attached to one of the best offenses in the NFL, and he's going to be the clear alpha wide receiver. They didn't really sign anybody in the offseason. Michael Gallup is going to be coming back from a torn ACL, so he's not going to be even starting the year with them. They also drafted a wide receiver in the 3rd round, Jalen Tolbert, so nothing super significant. CeeDee is going to be the obvious alpha wide receiver year. I'm almost positive that his targets, his everything is going to go way up. I actually had him closer to the wide receiver 10 or 9 earlier, but the more and more the offseason's progressed, the more and more I've just liked him. Another person who I just don't really see a lot of question marks. He just hasn't proved it to us yet that he can be, a top 10 wide receiver. But if you've watched the talent, I think it's pretty clear that he can be. He was drafted to be great. He can be great. Next up, a wide receiver 7, we got the Iron Man out of Tampa, Mike Evans. He had 74 receptions last year, right over 1,000 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. And that's where Mike Evans really shines, is the touchdown total. If you've heard anyone talk about fantasy, you know that touchdowns are normally something that you don't want to try to rely on to be predictive too often, because a lot of times they're a sign of positive or negative regression. Mike Evans, though, has proved to us that he's going to do this year over year. He pretty much has every single year of his career. He's also tied to Tom Brady, who they're going to their final year, and I know he's gunning for MVP, for Super Bowl, for everything. So they're going to be trying to get as many touchdowns, as many passing yards as they can. And Chris Godwin is also coming off a torn ACL. We don't know when he's going to be back. He probably will be back sometime during the season, but he's not going to be 100%. And the beginning of the season, I'm almost positive it's going to be Mike Evans. And who? They signed Russell Gage. Also, Gronk is gone. I mean, Mike Evans could finish as a top 5 wide receiver. I see that for sure in the range of outcomes. Tampa also led the league last year in passing yards and passing touchdowns. So that just reemphasizes what I was just saying, that they are going to be going for it. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot, and it is going to go to Mike Evans. He's one of the best goal line backs in the league, because when they're on the 1-yard line, they throw that just little fade to the back of the end zone, and it works every damn time. There's nothing that anybody can do about it, except for Marshawn Lattimore. But yeah, absolutely love Mike Evans this year. Everything's lining up. Gonna be just a touchdown machine. All right, moving on to my dog, who's also breaking my heart, Deebo Samuel. All right, he had 77 receptions with 1,400 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, along with 59 rushes, 365 rushing yards, and 8 rushing touchdowns. So, I mean, just a weird year. He finished as the wide receiver 2 in total fantasy points and fantasy points per game. Right now, there are just so many questions with him. He requested a trade out of San Francisco, so we don't know what's going on with that, where he's going to go, if he'll be an SF or if he's going to go somewhere else. I'm a Niners fan, so obviously I want him to stay, but I'm not working in the front office yet. He's also talked about not liking his role. Like, he doesn't want to be a running back, which I get, because you don't want to take those extra hits. You get hit so much more often, and it'll extremely diminish his career, so I totally get it. He was just so goddamn good at it that of course they want him to do it. So we have no idea how that's going to play out. We got to see what they say whenever he does get traded or re-signs with the Niners. And if he does re-sign with the Niners, we got going to have a new quarterback with Trey Lance, and Trey Lance is a runner, so he's obviously going to take away some of those opportunities along with some of the goal line opportunities. So that's going to hurt him. That's what I mean. There are just so many question marks with him. I have no idea really where to rank him. So this is where I have him now. He could go lower. He could definitely go a lot higher, but that boy's a grown man on the field. It is unbelievable. I love watching him. I really hope he stays with the Niners, because I'm completely biased in that way. But I don't know. We just got to wait and see with that. So that's where I have him for now. You can kind of see how the questions on these wide receivers goes more and more as we continue on through the list. And that's a big reason why these people are where they are. Anyways, moving on to wide receiver 9, who's Tyreek Hill. Seeing Tyreek Hill this low at like the wide receiver 9 is pretty weird for me, because normally he's like wide receiver 3 at worst. But I think it's pretty hard not to drop him around this range. Last year, he had 111 receptions, 1,200 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns, which honestly is pretty uncharacteristic of him. It was by far the most receptions and targets he's ever had on a season, but his touchdown rate and his yards per route were significantly lower than it has been. You'll see it right up here. Yet with all of that, he still finished with wide receiver 6. So really weird. It's hard to know if that stuff is a sign of him slowing down and he's not making as many big breakaway plays and all of that kind of stuff, or if it was more of a sign of the offense diminishing last year. Really hard to tell. It doesn't really matter because he got traded to the Miami Dolphins and now he is with Tua. And like, I get Tyreek going on his podcast and saying that he's more accurate than Patrick Mahomes, but who are we joking here? I just do not see Tua being able to support a top end wide receiver like that, like Tyreek has been. Not to mention they also have Jalen Waddle, who I absolutely love and honestly reminds me of very similar mold as Tyreek Hill. Obviously not as good as Tyreek Hill because nobody is, but a similar field stretcher who's really good in the short game as well and can just blow by anyone, create stuff after the cat, but is in a little bit smaller of a frame. And now there's 2 of them on the same team, which I mean is great for the Dolphins, but for fantasy, it's really not ideal because I imagine this ball is going to get spread out a lot and Tyreek can make a lot for himself, but there's like, he can only do so much. They also have a new coach, Mike McDaniel, who is like, I mean, I love because he's coming from the Niners and he's really good at utilizing players and what they're good at. So I think it's gonna go good. Obviously, I still haven't ranked in my wide receiver 9, but it's just not gonna be what it was in the past, which I think is to be expected when you go from Patrick Mahomes to Tua. But I know they're gonna force the ball in Tyreek's hand. They're gonna give him it on rushes. Like, he's gonna get his. Not the same in my opinion, but I'm just some dude with a microphone. Anyways, moving on to my last wide receiver in this video, my number 10. First teammate on the list, we got T. Higgins of the Bengals. He had 74 receptions last year, almost 1,100 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. His final finish wasn't that great, but over the second half of the year, he was the wide receiver 11 in total fantasy points and the wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game. And in the playoffs, he was the wide receiver 6 in both of those. And what I talked about with Jamar Chase, about another year of chemistry with Joe Burrow, another year of T. Higgins developing, along with them significantly improving their offensive line, I think that having both of these guys finish up here is super feasible. And if you go back and look, there's actually almost always a pair of wide receivers that are up in this range or multiple pairs. So it's almost more likely for some pair to finish here than it is not to. At least in the top 15, there's almost always a pair of wide receivers. So it's really not uncommon. Like, that shouldn't scare you away. If you think the wide receiver is great, you think the offense is great, and he's going to get the opportunity, which I think T. Higgins totally does. He's just going to be the wide receiver 2 or 1B behind Jamar Chase, which really isn't saying much because Jamar Chase is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL already. T. Higgins reminds me of that kind of like mini D-Hop build, and it's awesome to say. He just goes up and gets it, attached to a great offense, great quarterback, really hits every single box besides him being like the alpha wide receiver on his team. I will take T. Higgins right here all day. Love that man. All right, well, that's really it for my top 10. I'll be dropping the rest of my rankings sometime soon. I'll also definitely be dropping a mock draft video on Monday, so look for that. You guys popped up for me personally, like what I'm doing, this very, very small number that I am. You guys popped off the last one for me, so be tight if we do it again. See y'all in those ones. Peace.